Hi everyone, my name is Annie, and I'm the co founder of Seeds of Bliss, which is a global movement restoring human capacity in a world that demands permanent summer. My work focuses on helping people carrying high responsibility recalibrate their nervous systems and leadership through what I call seasonal capacity recalibration. After more than 10,000 client sessions, I began to see a common pattern. Capable people living in chronic self override. People who know how to function, how to perform, how to carry others, how to keep going, but not always how to stop, how to feel, how to grieve, how to let life change them. And that is why I am here today, because grief enters a world that worships functioning. And when grief arrives, functioning often fails. Today, I want to offer a different lens, not grief as a pathology, not grief as a detour, not grief as something to get over, but grief as initiation, loss as a threshold, a passage that, if met consciously, can reshape identity. It can restore truth and return life force. In the Western world, we live in a culture that teaches endless productivity. Keep growing, keep shining, optimizing, smiling, moving. There is very little room for winter, very little room for endings, for emptiness, slowing down, very little room for not knowing. And because of that, many people do not know how to meet grief. They know how to distract. They know how to numb. They know how to explain mentally. They know how to stay busy, but they do not know how to descend. So grief becomes prolonged, not because grief is wrong, but because the environment is really hostile to it. Imagine asking winter to bloom. Imagine asking night to become noon. This is what many grieving people experience. They are expected to remain summer while life has moved them into winter. And when people think of grief, they often think only of death. And yes, of course, grief includes death. But grief also comes through divorce. Grief also comes through illness. Grief also comes through infertility. It comes through migration. It comes through trauma. Maybe a child leaving home, or the collapse of a career, a betrayal that ends innocence, or maybe the version of you that can no longer continue. So grief does not only take people, it takes identities. The woman who was always strong, the man who was always needed, the leader who was always first in getting the answers to the table, the caregiver who forgot she had needs, the achiever whose body can no longer obey. Many people are grieving lives that no longer fit while trying to perform them anyway. And that creates tension. It creates a huge amount of tension that is actually exhausting. Over thousands of sessions, I saw something again and again. When grief is not digested, when grief is not metabolized, it doesn't disappear. It becomes symptoms. It creates fatigue, anxiety, irritability. It can become numbness, burnout, compulsive productivity, which is highly rewarded in our modern culture. It can become relationship conflict, or it can turn into loss of meaning. Sometimes people say, I don't know what's wrong with me. And often nothing is wrong with them. Something important has not been grieved. The nervous system holds unfinished endings, and the body carries what the mind postponed. So our life force actually gets bound to what was. And the energy that could create the future remains tied to preserving the past. Now, let me be clear, loss really hurts. Grief can break the heart open in ways language cannot really contain. I'm not romanticizing pain here, but pain and pathology are not the same thing. Initiation means an experience that changes your status. You cannot return as the same person. There was a before and there is a clear after. Grief often does this. The question is not whether grief changes us. It does. Of course, it does. The question is whether we are supported to let that change become wisdom instead of fragmentation. Many people fear grief because they think if they enter it, they will never come back. So they stay at the edge. But conscious descent is not drowning. It is entering with support, rhythm, and care. And it has many forms. It may look like telling the truth about what was lost, or allowing tears without calling them weakness. It can look like making room for anger without shame, letting identity dissolve before rushing to rebuild it. It can be listening to the body's pace and rhythm. It can look like receiving help or honoring cycles of movement and stillness, because grief is not linear, it's tidal. Some days the water recedes, some days it returns. This doesn't mean failure, it means nature, and we are part of nature. When grief is met rather than avoided, something extraordinary can happen. People become more honest, they become more tender. They find themselves less interested in performing and less available for false lives. They become more precise with boundaries. They become more intimate with time, more reverent toward ordinary moments. They often become less impressive to systems built on self-abandonment, and of course, more alive. This is why I say grief can restore life force, not by giving back what was lost. We can't do that. But by freeing the energy trapped in pretending nothing was lost. Like many of you here, I have known losses that changed me. People who left through death. People who left through life. versions of myself that could not come forward into the next season. I have also known the temptation to keep going too quickly, to translate pain into usefulness, to become productive before becoming honest. But grief taught me something very important. What we refuse to feel doesn't vanish, it waits. And what we are willing to feel can become capacity. Capacity to love again, capacity to lead differently, capacity to stay present in uncertainty, capacity to carry responsibility without abandoning ourselves. And capacity is a real game changer. Many of the people I work with are competent, caring, relied upon. They are actually the ones others lean on. And often they ask, when is it my turn to fall apart? And my answer is, perhaps not fall apart, but come apart enough that something truer can emerge. If grief visits every person, leaders, parents, therapists, doctors, founders, caregivers, teachers, then grief work is not private work only, it's collective work, because ungrieved people lead differently, parent differently, they love differently, they build differently, and healed capacity ripples. So if you're carrying grief right now, I do not invite you to rush healing. I invite you to respect the season you are in. If it is winter, let it be winter. If something has ended, let it end. If an identity is dissolving, do not mistake that for failure. You may be in initiation. You may be crossing a threshold your old self cannot cross with you. And if you support others in grief, remember, you do not need to fix their pain, you need to help make the passage safer. So I would like to wrap up saying that grief is not the opposite of life. Grief is one of life's deepest forms of participation. Grief is love meeting change. It is the heart refusing numbness. Grief is the soul insisting that what mattered really mattered. So no, grief is not something to get over. Sometimes grief is the doorway through which we become fully human. Thank you for being here with me today. And thank you, Tony and Ada, for organizing this whole conference.